In this video, we're going to build our final state for this first series. This state will allow the player to slide down a wall that they jump into, and they will also be able to perform a wall jump while sliding. Let's begin by expanding our tile map so that we have some walls that will work well for testing the wall slide action. We're going to add 2 vertical walls with small platforms at the top to climb up onto, and then we'll also add another ladder to allow the player to get up on top. Now, let's create a new script in our player states folder called wall slide state. As we've done with the other states, we'll inherit from the player state base class, then implement the constructor so that it passes its arguments to the base class constructor. We will also make sure to go back to our player script and instantiate a new wall slide state in our player's state dictionary. Now we can include a new Boolean property in our trigger info component that checks to see if the player is able to wall slide. We do not have to define any new collision checks to do this because it will rely entirely on the wall triggers we defined for the ledge climb state. First, we'll check to make sure we're not on the ground so that the player doesn't start wall sliding when they run into a wall while on the ground. Then we'll simply check to see if all 3 wall triggers are colliding. Now let's return to the move state script and define a transition into the wall slide state by including another if statement in update. We will check to see if the player is entering an input in the same direction that they are facing, and then we will check to see if the new wall slide property is true. This combination means that the player has collided fully with a wall and they are pressing into the wall because the wall triggers will always be on the front side of the player. If this condition is true, then we'll transition the player into the wall slide state. We're now going to define a series of settings that we will use in the wall slide state. In order to slow down the player's descent when they are wall sliding, we will simply lower the gravity scale. To do this, we will define a new setting constant called wall slide gravity scale, and we'll set it to a value below 1, which is the default gravity. We're also going to define a vector 2 that will represent the player's wall jump speed. These values might look a little strange because the horizontal speed is much larger than the vertical speed, but this is because we are applying a smooth damping function to the horizontal move speed. This means that any large spike in the value will be smoothed out. So to actually get a significant jump speed, we need to use a very large value to overcome the smoothing. There is no damping applied to the vertical speed, so this isn't necessary. We also need a float that will determine how long the player sticks to the wall once they stop pressing into it. This is so that they have a moment to actually jump off the wall before they fall off. This will be much easier to understand once you get to actually try out the wall jump action. Now we're ready to build out the wall slide state itself. Let's begin by defining the init method. We will set the animation to slide. We will also set the velocity to 0 so that the player sticks to the wall for a second before they begin sliding down. And we will also set the wall slide gravity scale we defined in the settings so they slide down slowly. Next, we'll include the managed update method where we'll start by calling update triggers to check for collisions. We'll first check to see if the player has lost full contact with the wall. If this is the case, then we'll transition them out of the wall slide state back into the move state. Next, we'll check to see if they are still pressing into the wall by comparing their move input to their facing value. If this is the case, then we'll reset a wall slide timer variable. We'll use the wall slide hold time setting we defined earlier for resetting this variable. Finally, if they are no longer pressing into the wall but they are still in contact with the wall, then in the else statement we will subtract the delta time from the wall slide timer. If this timer reaches 0, then we'll transition the player back into the move state. This means they have not been pressing into the wall for the full wall slide hold time, so they will fall out of the wall slide state. We will also include the jump input method, because we need to allow the player to jump out of the wall slide state. We'll check to see if the jump input has been entered, and then if the player is also pressing away from the wall, we will set their velocity to the wall jump speed and put them into the move state. Also notice that we are once again using the scale trick to make sure that the wall jump speed is being applied in the correct direction. That is all we need to do to set up our wall slide state. We can now run the application and test it out. You should be able to slide down the walls we created, and you should be able to wall jump back and forth between the walls to climb up to the top. Notice you can also combine this with the climb ledge action as well. This completes our final player state for this player controller series. In the final video, we'll introduce a map system that allows us to generate sections of the map from our script rather than needing to draw the entire map with the tile palette. And we'll also do a little cleanup of the code in general.